Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about advertising in games and tapping into the next wave. So we're going to have a discussion with some people in the industry who are intimately involved in this subject. And let me first frame it by saying that this is a huge area that's expected to grow at a 20% compound annual growth rate for the next several years. And we're talking about in-game advertising reaching over $10 billion over the next few years. So this is a very large revenue area that if you are not fully on top of now, or if you thought you were last year, you need to know what's going on now. And that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to go through our panelists and have them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Itamar from Anzu. Itamar?
Yes. Thank you, Steve, for having me here. Nice to meet you all. Great having me in this panel. I'm Itamar Benedy, CEO and co-founder of Anzu, leading in-game advertising company. We work across all platforms, console, PC, mobile, and we basically bring branded content inside the game in a way that on the one side, it's a new business model for game developers, but most important, it doesn't harm the user experience. It's exactly how we interact with content in the physical world.
Okay, Gabrielle, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks for having me here today. I'm excited to talk about this. My name is Gabrielle Heyman. I run global ad sales for Zynga. So I actually run a direct sales team working with brands and advertisers from everything from video ads in game to playables, integrations. It's been an exciting time to be at Zynga. We have really grown, made quite a few acquisitions, released some excellent titles. And so we're here to entertain 140 million people monthly currently and bring advertisers to people through the power of play.
Thank you. Ronnie, last but not least, please introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Ronnie, CEO of Lion Castle Entertainment. At Lion Castle, we concept, market, and publish the games, as well as secure the right partners for the right video games. That means Xbox, PlayStation, but also mobile, and of course also everything VR these days. My involvement spans design, marketing, monetization, production, and I played a key role in 3 worldwide #1 hits on mobile and on the console front. A couple of 100 games for every possible console since 1998, together with a lot of big partners like Procter & Gamble, Discovery, countless others. Now, the company is facing the latest evolution in gaming, which is actually the switch towards the game subscription models. There's more focus on reach, games being more immersive, but also being more than just brainless fun, so to say, and definitely also becoming more a mass product, becoming integrated in other industries, VR and e-commerce, and also advertising. And that's why I think advertising is definitely going to play a huge role in the gaming space. Well, already now, actually, but let's say for the future.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. The first thing I want to go over is how have gamers and their behavior changed over time, and how is that affecting the advertising market for games? Itamar, can you address that? It's not just mobile gamers and advertising that we're talking about anymore, right? It's every platform.
Correct. It's a big topic and we can speak a lot about this, but I think maybe a few interesting points is number one, console and PC games, I think, are seeing the success with mobile games. They're looking at free-to-play games, which wasn't very popular for console games in the past. And as that's happening, now advertising has a bigger play in that world. So the gamers understand that, to make something free, advertising is one way to build a business model around it. So that's one thing that we see. And second, I think this is this connectivity topic. So, the word metaverse was mentioned in many cases, but I think it's about people spending more time in virtual environments and looking as a game as also as a platform, as a social platform. And so consuming content in the gaming world, so having expectations of what the game plays in the role of the individual. And I think that will have a lot of implications, advertising one of them, but of course a lot of others. So that's maybe 2 points to highlight about this.
Thank you. Gabrielle, what is Zynga's take? Zynga has a great deal of experience in this area. And how are the gamers changing, and how is that reflected in advertising?
Zynga for a long time has made games with high reach, and that's really what brands want. They want high reach. So you could have a very successful game with under 1 million uniques, but it's driving so much in-app purchases, it's great. But for an advertiser, they want high reach. So of course, Zynga started on Facebook gaming. And at that time, we would get 30 million people in one day playing Farmville and do a takeover. That was that experience. Obviously, when I started at Zynga around 8 years ago, we were beginning our transition from web games to mobile games. The smartphone is not that old. I think we have to remember that. So, of course, this change in gaming going from web to mobile, what I will say about that is it's been more difficult to reach that many audiences every single day in one title. So that's something that's changed. Of course, there's events that drive a lot of usership in games, Lil Nas X concert in Roblox, or Travis Scott in Epic's title. But I think that what has happened is that a company like Zynga, we deliver many different titles for many different audiences. And so when you have a publisher that, is releasing a lot of titles, you still can get that scale. But of course, mobile gives you different other ways to interact, to engage, and then for advertising, obviously, to, be able to immediately click into the App Store, download the app that you were advertised, or make a purchase.
Well, thank you. Ronnie, what's your perspective on how the gamers have changed and how advertising has changed with it?
Well, they are getting more spoiled because lately, especially last year with COVID, there was more and more games, and they were just those really big games, the best games, like Roblox and Fortnite. They have a whole lot of users. It's all free to play. There are more and more games, and on the other side, Microsoft, Sony, they've got their Xbox Pass, the Sony Pass, EA has their Pass. All the games are free, so that is making the market more difficult. And that means people will get more spoiled anyways. In that sense, the console market is growing more towards the mobile market, because people are now not really easily to be convinced to spend $40 on a game, or 50, or even 60 or more, unless it's of course the Call of Duty or the Assassin's Creed. But everything else, it is going towards free to play there too. Then advertising is the obvious choice, depending on what title you have. We have a PlayStation 5 racing title in development right now, and there it makes complete sense to find advertisers and sponsors, because the racing fans feel this added value when you have the real brand for tires, for body kits, turbos, but also energy drinks, anything that fits their imagination and the game. On the other hand, you've also got medieval fantasy games, and you can't just place a McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken in some kind of elven village, But those are now the difficulties we are facing. But for my end, what has been changed most last year is that it's now all towards free to play, also in the console market.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. It is a changing landscape, and that is providing more and different opportunities for game developers, both as programmatic advertising to acquire users, but also for brands to reach a large audience and influence them. And now that gaming is of a scale that compares favorably to any other media, that is changing. Itamar, what's your perspective on brands and how they're going to be using gaming in the next few years? What should game publishers and developers be looking at?
Yeah, I have actually great news for game developers in this regard, because in the last few years, there is this change from a marketer's perspective. What's the perception of the gamer? So if in the past, a lot of brands and marketers and media agencies were seeing some of the gaming audience as more of a niche audience of those geeks locked in their basement, now there is understanding that, the gaming world is very diverse, and there's basically almost everyone is a gamer. And so brands are very excited these days to work closer with game developers, to spend ad dollars in games, because consumer time spent for a while has been in gaming. But in the last few years, and COVID had a strong impact on that. Now that's been accelerated, and brands are extremely excited in looking into the gaming audience as an advertising category. And as that's happening, now the brands and marketers are realizing why gaming is such of a strong platform to communicate with consumers. Number one, with changes around privacy taking an important seat in advertising, the cookie and the IDFA will not stay for long. Now the contextual relevancy of a game is something the brands are very excited about. Of course, the user base, but also this diversified audiences, if it's a mobile game, a console game, a shooter game, or a casual game. And then, of course, brand safety. There is no user-generated game content in most games, so the brand can have a good control and understanding of exactly where his content will be placed. So basically, our thesis in Anzu in the last year was to pick up on this excitement for marketers and to bring on top of that this layer of technology of what do game developers need to do in order to be very attractive and appealing for marketers. And that's programmatic advertising, as you mentioned, also this in-game format that makes sense from a brand in the sense of how you communicate with gamers. So think about like a digital out-of-home ad format. And then, of course, making it easy for the brands to buy media, and more important, have strong ways to be convinced around media value. So this doesn't be seen as a one-off campaign, but more like as a reoccurring month-over-month ad dollar spend. So all in all, very good news for game developers, and this is just the beginning of brands and advertisers being excited about gaming, and there's a lot that I believe is going to develop in this overlap between these two industries in the next years to come.
Oh, thank you, Itamar. Gabriel, do you see, I know in the past you've probably had to convince brands that this was a good idea to advertise. Are you seeing more brands coming to you? Is that changing their perception of the audience?
Definitely. I mean, I think that this is the peak time I've seen of brands engaging with us, both from inbound or ones that we've been working on for a long time. I would say that there's the brands, Ronnie mentioned P&G, there's the brands that decided a long time ago and discovered gaming there, and they saw it. I want audiences, I want moms, I want chief household officers, that person that's buying all the products for the home. And oh, look, in games, I can actually get reach. I can get the audience I want, and I can get it in different formats that are relevant to different brands that I have. So there's audiences really for every type of person in gaming, from young to old. Even the baby boomers are gaming. They're on their mobile devices gaming. So you can really reach all audiences. And I think that what's been so fascinating to me, and I'm still a little bit dumbfounded by it, is this persistent perception on like that young male gamer. Because I worked at Pogo.com. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was online games acquired by EA back in the 2000s. It was all web, and we had a lot of mom gamers then. So, so the audience, I think, the truth is, and I'll end it with this, like, I grew up gaming. You see gaming on the ancient hieroglyphics from Egypt. Everyone games, and brands are seeing that the one common thing in game is engagement. And this engagement is like the special secret sauce that is really driving special ROI as an advantage of other formats like TV or video in video streaming environments, or social media, for example. So they're seeing the ROI. And then we're getting more and more converts, definitely.
Thank you, Ronnie. Do you see game developers as being more accepting of advertising as a business model and as part of the business, and how they should consider that going forward?
Well, publisher, yes. Developers is another step. That takes a little bit longer. Most developers are still like, we want to make a shooter, a space shooter, that kind of things. But what they see already, that the bigger developers and also the publishers, they do see a lot of opportunities, because, well, where it's going towards, it's not just the gaming for games like fun, but as you say, it's also bleeding out to other industries. So For example, you apply gaming for everything. If you want people to just teach something, to learn something, to get better at something, to create more awareness, gaming is now the way to go anyways. That's something that more and more people now finally seem to just realize, and not only for the young people, the Gen Z, but also for the older people. Like, for example, now we are working on a title called VR Sports, and what they can do, people can exercise in a virtual gym of their own choice. That can be, for example, a Golden Gym, a Nike gym, or Pizza Hut gym, any company brand. You can also customize your own fitness coach, like super hot and everything, but you can also check out your shoes or shirt or clothing, whatever you want, and you can instantly buy those products from within the game. And that's something I see where it's heading towards regarding advertising and gaming and, well, all industries actually. Gaming is just like a platform like Facebook or Instagram or any other platform eventually. But it's more
really broadening from just advertising to brand building to shopping and experience and all sorts of aspects, which really it changes the opportunity for the game developers, and it's something that they need to consider as they develop a game. What opportunities are there in this game for branding opportunities, for virtual shopping, for connection with certain advertisers? Itamar, how do you think that the game genre affects the advertising opportunities? Are there certain types of games or settings that are better for certain types of advertising and others that make it more difficult?
Interesting topic to discuss. I mean, like in general, from our internal research, we believe 80% of the games worldwide are relevant for advertising. On the one side, of course, if there's a very violent game, then maybe some brands can be concerned about putting their content there, even though that's changing and a lot of brands are moving from a brand safety state of mind to a brand suitability state of mind. Is that game suitable for my brand, even if it's a violent game? In the past, Call of Duty was being seen as a violent game. Today, Call of Duty is being seen more of a popular culture topic. So that's maybe one area where there is some limitation. Second area is that there's maybe some very fantasy games that it's harder to find ways to make branded content and in-game advertising very authentic. But, like a few years ago, not a lot of people believed that Riot Games and League of Legends will put advertising, and now it looks very natural and obvious that there's advertising there. So I think it's more about being creative around how to implement it. I mean, of course, games like sport, racing, like there's a urban environment games, it's very intuitive how to put the brand content. In other environments, just requires a bit of more creative and work around how to do that. Because, in many games, we see fake ads, and that's like a strong indication that advertising should work there because number one, the game developer can earn money from it and very significant money from that. Number two, it makes the game experience better. There is a Comscore research, and we have a lot of internal research that gamers prefer real brand content versus fake ads. And it gives more credibility to the game. Like historically, Mercedes had a business model of game developers paying them to be allowed to use the Mercedes content in the game. And I think this business model is totally out of scope today, because if in the past Mercedes was being seen as pop culture and gaming was a niche, I think it's now becoming the other way around, and we see Mercedes and a lot of other brands advertising in esports, advertising in gaming, even in environments that are not very intuitive for that brand. Because as Gabriel said, there is this massive audiences and the attention and the engagement there, and then combine that aspect with this premium environment of amazing graphics. When you're linked in playing the game, there is no second screen. It just makes it like a perfect case for brands. So, a lot of our work is education around new game genres and how to do these brand activations, both from a brand perspective and from a game perspective, but also from a gamer perspective. And so there's, of course, a lot of development in these pillar between these three players, but it's getting significantly better, and it's a very exciting area to look at what will come next.
Well, Gabrielle, you had mentioned big events in games and concerts and other things where they're becoming cultural influences on their own, and that's another aspect to it. It's not just advertising or brand placement. It's you can become a cultural phenomenon and be viral and get in other media by virtue of doing something in a game, which is not an occurrence that happened before. Is that changing the nature of how people perceive the opportunities in advertising and gaming?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah, we had talked before about this interesting phenomena happening where musicians are marketing their songs in games, like really, really leaning into it. We mentioned it earlier today. There's a lot of celebrity in gaming now, and you see J-Lo making commercials for games. You see A-list celebrities getting involved, and obviously in esports too. So many athletes also involved in just esports. So there's a definite kind of just it's mass market entertainment. But I did want to, there's a few points and some things that we just talked about that I think are important to bring up as well that Inmar was reviewing. There's a lot of different ways to engage with brands and ads in general in your game. So I think it's important for developers and publishers to look at each title uniquely and what that opportunity is. And even a title, you had mentioned before, no one wants to see Starbucks in Game of Thrones. But the truth is, if you're playing a free-to-play Game of Thrones game, you might exchange your attention to watch like a video for something in exchange for something in the game. And so it might make sense just to put a video ad in some of those games. It doesn't have to be, perfectly in the environment. But on the other extreme, a car racing game, obviously there's a lot more opportunity because just that whole entire segment is just got so much branding in it in general anyway, right? Whether it's NASCAR or billboards when you're driving, or the radio station. We were talking about, like, it makes perfect sense to have musicians playing on a radio station while you're racing a car and have an ad. Why wouldn't you have an ad on the radio in between? So you're making these things that are bespoke for every single game. But there is standardization. So, sometimes rewarded elements make sense. Sometimes just a video ad and a commercial break, just like on TV, makes sense. And then the last thing I'll say about it is if you're going to integrate a brand in the game, in the fabric of the game, I think that one of the things we've learned is that you need to bring value to the consumer. So it's kind of annoying. You don't want to just stuff an integration in. But if you're, in Farmville and you have an opportunity to like make a cereal, Kellogg's cereal, but you're getting something that you really wanted, like a special bench for your farm or something like that in exchange, then it becomes exciting. It's like people want that. People are excited to have something in game because we all are gamers here and we all know how you have to earn it. You have to like work hard to get something, especially if you're not going to pay for it. So that's where advertising comes in to save the day and drive engagement for publishers as well.
Well, before we wrap up, which we're getting towards the end, I wanted to talk about one area, and that is, as a game developer, what do you recommend they do as they're hearing about, advertising is a potential good monetization for my game? As a publisher, as a developer, where do I go to figure out how to take advantage of this opportunity? Where do I start? Ronnie, can you give some tips to people as to, if you're not familiar with it already, where do you go to find out more? Who do you talk to? Where do you start?
Well, you go to GameSpeed Summit 2021. Yeah, there's a lot of resources you can find on the internet, of course, and there are a lot of companies involved in this too. So I think there's plenty of companies you can learn from. Anzu, of course, there too, but they are in this call too. If you have time for the Q&A afterwards, Anzu can answer all the questions on the console marketing in particular, or advertisements. But the game developers specifically, they should really think twice about the game design, not only if the game is fun, but also keep in mind for who am I actually creating these games, and what does that also added value for the sponsor of the advertisers. And that is not something they are used to just yet. And that's a mind change they need to make.
Yeah, think about the potential as you are designing the game, not after you're all done.
We have from the beginning on. Yeah.
But it's also not only the. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's not only like it's not only the fit, right? When do I want to reward it? When do I want an integration? What does this make sense? It's also the ad tech. That's a big recommendation. I have built it with the ad tech requirements from advertisers. So if you're going to consult with a network who might be funneling through your supply, or a brand and an agency, there's viewability requirements. There's, targeting requirements. So you want to just understand what that ad tech is too. So build the game right so you don't have to fix it later. I know this from experience.
Yeah, it's much easier if you design it that way early on than rather you have to go back and, we need to yank this out and redo this. And yeah, Itamar, obviously you have some thoughts on where to go.
Of course. I mean, basically we have two types of partners, right? So with mobile game developers, we're offering them a new revenue on top to monetize new placements of the game on top of their existing ad dollars. So there is no cannibalism with the revenues that they're doing today with rewarded and interstitials, and then there's placement that they cannot monetize today that we can monetize it on top. And with console and PC, it's more of something new. Most of the console and PC game developers don't monetize today with in-game advertising or with programmatic advertising. So it's more of like for the first time to introduce something like this. And in general, we see 4 pillars when we speak with game developers around if this is the right fit for them. So it's number 1, how much time will the integration take? Number 2, what's the revenue opportunity? Does it justify the time it takes me to integrate? Number 3, what's the gamer's response and feedback around that? And number 4 is like, can we trust our technology in the sense of tech performance and memory allocation management and security and privacy? So our work is around going one by one in those 4 pillars and explaining why this is and what this makes sense. And of course, we can offer, revenues up front and in ways to make the developers comfortable. And, we have 2 very exciting investors. I think this speaks about the excitement and the opportunity. WPP is the biggest advertising group in the world. It's the first ever investment they're doing in gaming. And Sony is the owner of PlayStation. It's one of the biggest, gaming platforms and companies. They invested in us the first time they invest in advertising in games. So I think this helps from a credibility perspective, both from games and from brands. And in general, if there's any game developer and listening here, I would be happy to chat and explain about what we do, why we're excited about this. And this basically keeps us busy.
Well, I think the takeaway that everyone should have is that things have changed a lot. There's a huge and growing opportunity for advertising of varying kinds and all sorts of games, and that every game developer and publisher should really try to be on top of this issue and understand where advertising will fit into their overall strategy as they move forward, because this is a big opportunity and a growing one and a rapidly changing one. And I want to thank Itamar and Gabriel and Ronnie for being part of this panel. And we're going to move over to the chat area and take questions and continue our discussion. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.